Hi, everybody. Today's Monday, October 20th, 2025, and our friend Paul Craig Roberts is here with us. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
Paul, let's start with your understanding of Trump's so called peace plan, and you think that is not going to work. We know that Israel is attacking has been attacking in the aftermath, attacking Gaza in the aftermath of signing that agreement, and more than 120 bombs were dropped on Gazans. And yesterday and today, more than 40 Palestinians were killed, were murdered. Here is what Donald Trump said, his reaction to what Israel is doing.
Israel strikes on Gaza today?
Well, we're going to have to see what's happening. We want to make sure that it's going to be very peaceful with Hamas. And as you know, they've been quite rambunctious. They've been doing some shooting, and we think maybe the leadership isn't involved in that. Some rebels within, but either way, it's going to be handled properly.
Is the ceasefire still in place?
Yeah,
Yeah. What do you make of it, Paul, with all these, controversies?
Well, Trump clearly was blaming Hamas. But of course, Hamas hasn't got airplanes and American bombs to drop on themselves. Yesterday was the 10th day of the ceasefire. And yesterday, Israel bombed homes, schools, hospitals. Killed 45 people, injured another 100 and something. That's the 10th day of violating the ceasefire that Trump says is still in place. So, as I thought at the beginning, the ceasefire is not really a ceasefire. It was a way to deceive Hamas, get the hostages back. And of course, that Israeli minister declared, as soon as we get the hostages back, we're going to start bombing again. And they did. So I find it pathetic that Trump makes a fool of himself, makes a fool of his country. I find it pathetic that nobody will stop this genocide. Nothing happens. And I find it extraordinary that the Palestinians, for 47 years, have allowed the Israelis to kill them off village by village. And they never armed themselves. They never got united. They outnumbered the Israelis. They could have won a war. They did nothing. The Arabs have done nothing. The Western democracies have done nothing. And we keep sending them bombs to bomb women and children. And we keep sending them money to purchase our representatives in the House, in the Senate, and the presidency. So it's quite an astounding situation. The United States has no sovereignty. It can't do anything that Israel disapproves of. And it doesn't matter what Trump says. Whatever he says one day, he says the opposite the next. Or what he says one morning, he says the opposite in the afternoon. There's no ceasefire. It's clear as day. The Israelis are going to eliminate Palestine. And if they have to, all the people as well. And nobody's doing anything about it. And Trump's peace plan, this was some kind of a ruse in which an international government was going to take over Palestine. But of course, there's nothing left of Palestine. So I think it's already happened. I mean, and even the Russians, you would think the Russians would have some sense, but there's no sign of it. They're still talking about a two-state solution. Where's the Palestinian state? There's no Palestinian state in Trump's peace plan. There's an international governing board. Who appoints it? What interest does it serve? Israel's, of course, and perhaps Trump's real estate plans for Gaza.
Paul, there was an interview, 60 Minutes had an interview with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. And they were asked if, because before signing the agreement, Jared Kushner went to Gaza and saw what has happened to Gaza. He said, how do you describe the situation there? He said, it seems that they use nuclear bombs there. Everything is destroyed and demolished. And he was asked if he thinks that was a genocide, what he was watching. He said, no, that wasn't. And then Steve Witkoff came in and said that he thinks that it's not genocide, it was a war. What is that war, in your opinion? Was that a war? War is what's happening in Ukraine. Two armies are fighting each other. One of them is supported by the United States and the whole West, and on the other hand, you have an army. Two armies are fighting each other with new weapons, modern weapons. Do we have the same situation in Palestine?
Oh, of course not. No. The Hamas isn't an army. It doesn't have tanks and artillery and air force, and the only missiles it has are those relatively harmless homemade things that seldom hit anything. They mainly fight with rifles or maybe some kind of explosive device they can lay in the rubble for Israelis to walk over or tank to drive over. But it's not a war, of course. It's a genocide. If it's a war, it's a strange war where almost all the casualties are mothers and children. None of whom are armed. So no, it's not a war. It's the extermination of people in Palestine. It's been going on since 1947. That would be 78 years. And for 78 years, the world has done nothing whatsoever about it, but it prances around talking about the great moral democracies. Who keep supporting Israel as they destroy Palestine. I mean, the maps tell the story. You can look at the maps. There's 4 maps side by side. And it starts off almost all of Palestine is Palestinian. It ends up, there's a few little pinpricks that are Palestinian. So the country was stolen, and initially the people were driven out. They were in refugee camps in Jordan, in Lebanon. And if memory serves, the Israelis actually attacked one of those refugee camps and killed everybody in it. I think it was one in Lebanon. I don't really remember. The Israelis have committed so many horrific crimes, it's just hard to remember them. But nothing has ever been done about it. The Arabs have never done anything. The Palestinians themselves have never done anything. So they basically accepted their own annihilation. And the resistance has always been by relatively few. The PLO and then Hamas. It's it's sort of guerrilla, a minor scale guerrilla operation, but it I don't understand it. I don't understand. We had the United States used to have presidents capable of making a moral decision and who had the power to enforce it. But
Paul, even Carter was not that much, you know. He knew, but you don't see that in
no, you
his.
don't see. Of course, they got rid of Carter. And when he published his book, I forget what it was called. What was it? Peace, Not Apartheid. All the Jews on the Carter Center board resigned, and all the money going into his efforts to fight river blindness in Africa and build homes. All the Jews pulled all the money. But a lot of people thought that Israel was making a mistake and that the consequence of the horrific treatment of Palestinians would come back to bite them, to harm them, and that the Arabs would finally rise up and destroy them. But of course, there's never been any indication of that. And as I think I've said before on your program, I think the Arab world is finished. There are no more states. The United States destroyed the Arab world under the guise of a war on terror, but it was really a war for Israel in the interest of greater Israel. It was organized by the Zionist neoconservatives, and they used 9/11 as the new Pearl Harbor to sell the insouciant, naive, unaware Americans the lie that we were under attack by Muslim terrorists and had to kill them over there before they killed us over here. And so the whole history of the 21st century so far, the first quarter, the first 25 years of this new century, we've been fighting wars for Israel and telling the Americans we're fighting terrorists. But of course, Gaddafi was not a terrorist, and Saddam Hussein was not a terrorist. Assad was not a terrorist. It's also absurd. But Americans are so poorly educated, they really don't know anything, and they just hear on the news, and they're not really interested. What's it got to do with them, they think. So Israel succeeded. So it's all over. It's just a question of how it's finally dressed up. It's, Trump's doing his best to dress it up for Israel, like this great peace settlement, this ceasefire, and this notion of a governing board for Palestine, and him rebuilding it into some resort where they'll all be well off, making money, but he dresses it up for Israel, but they don't let him. They say, no, we're going to kill them. So we get the hostages back. And they're constantly bombing and bombing and bombing. So they destroy the ceasefire, the fake ceasefire that Trump creates to let them quietly take Palestine. They're just so aggressively evil. They want blood. So, and the world does nothing. And as I say, the Palestinians didn't do anything either.
It seemed the whole concept of reconstructing Gaza is somehow a new idea for settlers to go in Gaza and to They say that Gazans can live there, but who's gonna run Gaza? That's important.
Well,
If the
certainly not Palestinians.
Yeah.
They've never been allowed to run it. They don't control their own borders. They have no access to their own seacoast. They have no control over their airspace. They've never controlled it. It's most referred to as an open air concentration camp. It was a place to put Palestinians that they drove out of their villages in the West Bank when Jordan and Lebanon were full of refugee camps and didn't want any more. And I mean, the Palestinian, 3 generations of Palestinians born in refugee camps. I think there are more Palestinians in these camps outside Palestine than there are in Palestine. So it's, I think, a foregone conclusion that Palestine's over and done with. I'm not celebrating it. It just seems to be the fact.
Yeah. Paul, do you consider any sort of difference between Jordan, UAE, and Saudi Arabia, or they're all the same? They don't have any sort of leverage, any sort of, negotiation leverage with the United States.
No, I don't have any. You'd think the Saudis, because of oil, but no, they don't have any. The Saudis tried, or maybe still trying, to work out some agreement with Pakistan, even though the Pakistanis are not Arabs. But they have nuclear weapons, and Israel has now declared both Saudi Arabia and Pakistan to be part of what they claim is Greater Israel. And so that means that Saudi Arabia and Pakistan can expect the same treatment that Libya got and Iraq got and Syria got. So maybe they'll unite in some way, and the nuclear umbrella of Pakistan will cover Saudi Arabia and be something to counter the Israeli nukes with. But I don't know that. I don't know what will come of all that. I think the most important thing at this time is this upcoming meeting in Hungary between Putin and Trump, assuming it happens. The problem, there are several problems with this meeting. I don't know if you want to talk about this or not. Shall I go on? Or
Yeah, go ahead, Paul. Yeah.
You see the envoys that are representing Putin and the ones representing the United States or Trump, they have their own agenda. They're businessmen. And Putin's envoy, to the extent that my knowledge is more or less correct, he's acting in the interest of his business friends whose connections are in the West, not with the BRICS. These are businesses that were getting involved with Western firms and financial organizations, and they'd have to start all over from the bottom if they shift their interest to the BRICS. They don't have connections there. They have connections in the West. And so what Putin's envoy is up to, in my view,
You're talking about Kirill Dmitriev.
yeah,
Yeah.
what he's up to is um, shifting Russian economic policy away from BRICS toward the West. So he will mislead Putin. He will pressure Putin to make concessions that let his agenda prevail and earns him brownie points with the West. And I think the same for Trump's, Kellogg and Witkoff. They are again. I think Witkoff is a multi-billionaire. Kellogg was the heir to the Kellogg cereal fortune. He has international business connections. So they too have the same motive that Kirill Dmitriev has, their business interest. And so they're working for that, not for resolving the real problem, which is the presence of NATO and American missile bases on Russia's border. That's not their interest. Their interest is getting rid of the current situation in Ukraine. They don't care what concessions that Putin makes, as long as they come out having shifted Russian economic focus back to the West. So I think that's really what's going on. I don't know why Putin is so desperate. He may not be. It may be that it's all disinformation. Like the meeting in Anchorage. We were told that Putin has agreed they're going to be a deal, but nothing happened. So it could be all the talk is just being made by the envoys trying to position the Trump and Putin such that they have to make some kind of a deal because it's what everyone expects and it resolves the problem. And so that's what is really going on. I mean, a lot of people will say I'm crazy and cynical, but I've seen enough of how governments work that I think my explanation that I just gave you is what's really going on. And the notion that Trump, who doesn't pay attention to what people tell him, he's used to telling you, not listening. So I still don't think he has any idea of what Putin means by an agreement. And the agreement is not just stopping the conflict in Ukraine. That solves nothing for Putin. The problem for Putin, as he's made clear, is Russia hasn't any security. There are NATO's all over their borders, and there are American missile bases in Poland and in Romania. And there are likely to be some now in the Baltics and some in Moldova. And so Ukraine is just one place that they could have put the bases. And it's kind of hard to see Trump standing up to the war complex, the military security complex, and say, okay, we're getting off of Russia's borders. Well, they don't want that. They want the profits from armaments, from an arms race, from conflict. Peace does not serve the interest of the war forces. So no one mentions that or discusses that. I follow to some extent, discussion of so-called American foreign policy experts. It is mainly just nonsense and about Russian weakness and how we can win nuclear wars and all this kinds of garbage. There's nothing serious. You can't. This fellow Mearsheimer, he says some sensible things, but even he, I don't think, gets the full picture. But most of them don't get even a tiny piece of the picture.
No, nobody wants to hear Mearsheimer, Paul. Nobody. They don't care what Mearsheimer is talking about.
Yeah, they don't want to hear him, so you know for certain they don't want to hear me. So, and Gilbert Doctorow, a week or two ago, he finally saw it the way I see it, that Putin was bringing on the war he wants to avoid by accepting every provocation and having no red lines or no enforced red lines. And he finally said that what I've been saying for all these years. Well, the other day, our friend Larry Johnson published on his site an amazing ad hominem attack on Doctorow. It wasn't written by Larry. It was written by three people I've never heard of. It was all total nonsense. It was just nonsense. But it was a real ad hominem attack. And they completely misread everything Doctorow had said. Everything he said, he said the opposite of what he said. So I'm not here to get involved in somebody's ad hominem attack on somebody else, but I only mentioned it to show you can't even get a debate going. Dr. O made real points. He may be wrong. I may be wrong, but there's no debate. Instead, ad hominem attacks. So you can't even get these people to seriously examine their own position.
There has to be a debate. I believe that, Paul, because after all, because all these people that who are somehow criticizing each other, they believe that there has to be, they have to decide to put an end to the conflict in Ukraine, because this conflict is not going anywhere good for anybody.
Well, you see, the conflict really isn't in Ukraine. We've talked about it before. The conflict is the inbred hostility in the Western world toward Russia. And that inbred hostility goes back to Lenin's Bolshevik Revolution. It goes back to the Cold War that began after World War II. Churchill said an iron curtain has descended over Europe. Well, we were in a Cold War all those decades. Eisenhower warned us the military security complex will get more powerful than the government. And they have. And we spend a huge amount of money on armaments because we prefer to have enemies. All this money that's spent on armaments is pointless, particularly when the Soviet Union collapsed over 3 decades ago. Why make Russia into an enemy? Soviet Union collapsed, it was gone. The Russians were happy. They weren't doing anything that threatened us. So that's the problem. The conflict in Ukraine is just a symptom of the illness. It's not the source. And resolving that conflict does not resolve the real conflict, because it's just a symptom. It's not the conflict. And on top of the hostility toward Russia being inbred throughout the Western world, we have the American foreign policy doctrine of hegemony. I repeat it endlessly, don't I? The Wolfowitz doctrine, the principal goal of American foreign policy, is to prevent the rise of any country that could serve as a constraint on American unilateralism. Well, that's Russia and China. And in the Middle East, it's Iran, if they had the inclination. So that's why they're the enemies. That's the only reason they're the enemies. None of them have done anything to us. But they could serve as a constraint. Iran could serve as a regional constraint. I doubt it will. And Russia and China can serve as a worldwide constraint. And so it doesn't mean they are, but they could. And so they have to go. We have to reduce the power in some way that they can't get in our way, or that they go along with our way of doing things and adjust to it. So that's the conflict, and nothing that will be discussed in the summit will deal with that. And I don't know what Putin is up to. I mean, it's clear Trump hasn't any idea about the Russian position. And as far as I can tell, nobody in the Trump administration knows, and certainly not Witkoff or Kellogg. I don't think they care. Just like I don't think Putin's envoy, Kirill, that he cares. He wants to get richer. So my whole experience in government was, it's a place where people use their appointments not to serve some national purpose, but to serve their career and their wealth. And the agendas of these people never coincide with any public interest. Never. So I think that despite all the hype, unless Putin surrenders, which he might do, because I think he genuinely wants to avoid any kind of real war, much less a nuclear one. I mean, if you look how hesitant he's been to fight what he calls a limited military operation, a police action, how reluctant he is to fight even this tiny little thing. He doesn't want to go to war, a real war. And he may choose just to accept some kind of a proposal from Trump that saves everybody's face, but doesn't even sweep the problem under the rug. It'll just be another demonstration of Putin's refusal to stand up. And so it'll get worse. Even if Putin surrenders and accepts Zelensky's terms, it'll just get worse, because the West will say, look how easy it was to run over him again. So it's just like the world never stood up to Israel about Palestine, and Putin apparently isn't going to stand up against the West. So it'll continue. Anyhow, I've said that enough times.
Oh, what's so bothering about the behavior of Donald Trump himself is that he feels that he can get something, a peace plan, as he got it between Arab states, and I don't know, it's not between Israel and Palestinian. It's, I don't know if Donald Trump's still together with other Arab states and together with Turkey and Europeans. What does that mean? He wants something similar in Ukraine, in my opinion, because it's all about show off. It's not anything substantial. That's the problem. I think they're not going to get to any agreements since they don't have it. They don't know what do they want. They don't know.
Well, I think Trump wants a success that he can wave and say, "See, I brought peace to Russia and Ukraine, and just like I did to Hamas and Israel, and all the other peace he claims." And if we overthrow Maduro, that'll be a peace, another peace achievement. So I think that Trump just wants something he can say was a success, and he'll pay a high price for that in terms of leaning on Zelensky and giving Putin cover. But the deal won't solve anything. Even if they get a deal, it won't solve anything. The only deal that will solve will be when the United States says we renounce the doctrine of American hegemony. We want world peace, and to get it, we're going to have to get NATO off of Russia's borders. That's what we're going to have to do. Otherwise, the conflict's going to continue. And eventually, even Putin will have to respond, or as Dr. Rose says, he could be removed, and they would have somebody in there much more nationalistic, much more decisive, much more willing to take risks. And the outcome will be worse than if Putin had stood his ground a long time ago. I mean, what if he'd simply sent in the paratroopers into Kiev in 2014? None of this would have happened. None of it. I mean, street gangs aren't going to be a match for Russian military troops. But he did nothing. He's never done anything to halt this ever widening, ever spiraling conflict. And of course, Trump's called off the Tomahawks for now because they're having a meeting. But what if he comes out in the meeting and says, well, I just don't know why Putin doesn't keep his word, or why Putin doesn't make a compromise, and he'll start talking about sending the Tomahawks again. So that's not over with. And as I said, even if Putin just surrenders, it's not over with. It's just going to be worse.
They're not going to capitulate, Paul. We know that Russia is in a far better position today than it was before the war in Ukraine started. But Donald Trump somehow feels that he can put pressure on India. Here, his recent comment, he said that they promised him not to buy Russian oil, which was false, from the Indian sources. And he again repeated that. Here is what he said, Paul.
And you even mentioned that in a recent phone call with Prime Minister Modi, and that Modi had said his country would stop purchases of Russian oil.
Yeah, he's going to stop purchasing.
But India said that they were not aware.
Well, then they're going to just keep paying a lot of tariffs.
Did you have the
If they
phone
said
call,
that, but I don't believe they said that. No, I spoke with Prime Minister Modi of India, and he said he's not going to be doing the Russian oil thing. So that's it.
But why would India say that they're not going to do it?
I don't know, but if they want to say that, then they'll just continue to pay massive tariffs, and they don't want to do that.
It seems that he lives his own reality. He doesn't,
Yeah.
because We've learned nothing from India in that direction that Donald Trump is arguing that they said that we're not going to buy Russian oil. Then who's going to provide them with oil and gas? And who's that capable of doing that?
I don't know why he says these things or why he thinks it hurts Russia if India doesn't buy his gas and oil. I've said before, indeed, Michael Hudson and I, some years ago, we wrote pointing out that the economic policy at the time dictated by that central bank woman in Moscow was fallacious. Russia doesn't need foreign exchange. Russia can finance its own development simply by creating rubles. The foreign exchange is useless. You see, what can they do with the foreign exchange? Well, right now they can't do anything because of the sanctions. But before the sanctions, okay, you sell oil, you get dollars. You can't spend the dollars in Russia. You can't go out and build roads and bridges or invest in new plant and machinery. You have to use rubles. So what do you do with the dollars? What? You put them in the central bank. They sit there. You have to then create rubles to pay for the development. So why have the dollars or any foreign exchange? So, in a country with all the oil and gas reserves of Russia, the currency should be very strong. It should be desirable because people will use it to buy energy, which is a very important resource. And it's in few places. So the whole thing is poppycock. There's no thought. I never see an intelligent discussion, except your shows. And a few like that. it's we live in mindlessness, and the governments are all lost in mindlessness. And the only way that could get India to stop buying Russian gas and oil is to bribe the Indian government. They could say, here, Modi, here's $10 billion. Now you're rich, but it'll disappear if you buy Russian oil. Well, that's about all they could do. I mean, I tend to think newer countries have a better chance that their leaders will act at least sometimes in the national interest. They're newer. India has come out of centuries of colonial rule. Russia and China came out of decades of highly irrational communist rule, where there really was nothing. I mean, I can remember when I was sent to the Soviet Union as exchange student in the 1960s early. There was literally nothing to buy. There was nothing, no food. There was no food in stores. There was nothing. We all had ideas of getting those Russian fur Cossack hats. It was a dream. Nobody had ever seen one. So, but they've come out of that, and China's, we don't have Mao and the Cultural Revolution where all kinds of innocent people are hounded and persecuted and there's nothing to eat. And all of that's gone. They're both successful societies. And so I think China, India, Russia are more likely to have leaders that at least occasionally act in the public interest and the national interest. They've come out of so much awful stuff that, and Iran too, perhaps, because their revolution was in the late 70s. So they too are a new country, free of us, free of the British, free of the Russians. And it probably will stay that way. So you probably find the leaders of those four countries, Russia, China, India, Iran, more in tune with what is the country's interest and what is the people's interest than you do in the West. Now, the trouble is that Russia got so brainwashed by Voice of America and Radio Free Europe, and the communist system was so awful that a lot of them are just pro-Western. And I think this can make it hard for Putin to make good decisions. But we'll see. The meeting between Trump and Putin is coming up. We'll see if
Do
it
you
has any
consider it
difference.
as the last chance of having?
I think so. I think it's the less chance. We'll see if it has any more effect than the Alaska meeting, which we were told, oh, this is wonderful, they've agreed, blah, blah. I mean, nothing happened. We'll see, but what's likely to happen, Trump, if nothing comes of this that Trump can use, he'll be bitterly disappointed. He's facing a failure, not a success. See, it's a risk for Trump to go take these things on because they can fail, and then, oh, Trump failed again. And if that happens, then he'll be quite frustrated and bitter toward Putin, and he'll blame Putin, not him or his advisors. And you can see him waving the tomahawks again. And at some point, I don't think Putin can get away with never responding. And we have to be getting very close to that point. So it could be bad. On the other hand, if Putin simply suddenly knocks Ukraine out of the war, which he could do at any minute, simply by making it impossible for the government to continue the war. He's never tried to stop Ukraine from being able to fight the war. He doesn't have to use nuclear weapons. That might send a signal to the West, well, he means it after all. And it might make the West more interested in a real solution, in which case they'll need a whole different set of advisors and foreign ministers and not all these silly women they have that talk about going to war with Russia. I saw just yesterday, I think it was, the Sweden defense minister, I think it was the defense minister, said that Sweden had to prepare for war with Russia. Well, I mean, Sweden. Does he think this is the Sweden of the 30 Years' War that had a formidable army? It's not. The Swedes can't even protect their own women from immigrant invaders. Are they going to go to war with Russia? So anyhow, I have to laugh because it's so pathetic and it's so sad and unreal and dangerous. And it's all for nothing.
Paul, before wrapping up, the situation with Venezuela is getting, critical. And Donald Trump came out and attacked, Rand Paul. He attacked two, two important, voices within the Republican Party, Rand Paul and Thomas Massey. One of them is not agreeing. These people are not agreeing with some policies in of the Trump administration. One of them is the policy toward Venezuela. Here is what Rand Paul said about Venezuela.
Well, obviously, you've been very focused on this. President Trump has authorized military strikes against suspected drug boats in the Caribbean. As you know, so far, more than 20 people, Senator, have been killed in 6 different strikes. Do you believe that these strikes against these suspected drug boats are legal?
No, they go against all of our tradition. You know, when you kill someone, you should know if you're not at war, not in a declared war, you really need to know someone's name at least. You have to accuse them of something. You have to present evidence. So all of these people have been blown up without us knowing their name, without any evidence of a crime. And for decades, if not centuries, when you stop people at sea in international waters or in your own waters, you announce that you're going to board the ship and you're looking for contraband, smuggling, or drugs. This happens every day off of Miami, but we know from Coast Guard statistics that about 25% of the time the Coast Guard boards a ship, there are no drugs. So if our policy now is to blow up every ship we suspect or accuse of drug running, that would be a bizarre world in which 25% of the people might be innocent. The other thing about these speedboats is they're 2,000 miles away from us. If they have drugs, they're probably peddling drugs to one of the islands of Trinidad or Tobago off of Venezuela. The idea that they're coming here is like, it's a huge assumption, and really shouldn't you have to present some proof? It is the difference between war and peace. In war, though, you don't ask people's name. But if they want all-out war where we kill anybody and everybody that is in the country of Venezuela or coming out, that has to have a declaration of war. It's something that is not pretty, very expensive, and I'm not in favor of declaring war on Venezuela, but the Congress should vote. The president shouldn't do this by himself.
Paul, the good thing about Rand Paul is he was one of the, I remember he was one of the, you know, within the Republic, one of the main voices to support Donald Trump during the Russia Gate. And he goes against Rand Paul, asking the people in Kentucky to remove him from his position. What is that? Does he understand that these people...
Stupidity. It's stupidity. Ego and stupidity. You see, what Rand Paul could have pointed out that if you board a ship in international waters, you've broken international law. What the French did to the Russian cargo ship or oil ship, whatever it was, in the North Sea or the Baltic. This was a violation of international law, but again, Putin just ignored it. So it has to be in your own territorial waters before you can, I think, legally board a ship. Otherwise, what's it got to do with you? It's in international waters. It's nothing to do with you. But what Rand Paul could say is, look, in the United States, do we just go out looking for suspected or possible drug dealers and shoot them down? No. The police that did that would be arrested for murder. You have to arrest them. You bring evidence, you indict them, you take them to trial. But we're not allowed nobody in America, no federal agent, no local or state police are allowed just to shoot suspected drug dealers. This is unheard of. So why are they allowed to shoot suspected people in international waters? So what Trump's doing is clearly an enormous crime. He's committing crimes in our name. This shouldn't be allowed. This is awful. Furthermore, the notion that Venezuela is some sort of a major source of drugs in the United States is absurd. I mean, what about Mexico? If he's going to bomb Venezuela because he says, or some idiot told him, that Venezuela's making drugs and bringing them to America, well, he can bomb Mexico. We know they make drugs in Mexico and bring here. And he can bomb China because reports are, they may be totally false. You don't know what you can believe anymore. But reports are that fentanyl, which killed George Floyd, is made in China and sold here. So we're going to go bomb China. Well, where will that get us? So the whole thing, look, this drug claim is an excuse to overthrow a government that dispossessed the United States of Venezuela's assets. We had the assets. Chavez got elected, probably one of the first to represent Venezuelans, and nationalized and said, look, what are you doing with our property? This is ours. And we've never forgiven Venezuela. And Maduro is Chavez's successor. Well, I see, according to reports, again, you never know what's true, but reports are that, feeling threatened, Maduro offered to give the state oil company back to the Americans just to avoid being bombed, invaded, hung like Saddam Hussein. And we didn't jump at the offer. So clearly, we simply want to get rid of any government in South America that represents the people instead of the New York banks and the United Fruit Company or whatever else. So this is just a blatant act of American imperialism. That's all it is. If they're drugs, then they should intercept the boats, search the boats. At least they could then say they have drugs. But if they intercept the boats in international waters, they've broken international law, and there's no indication that the drugs were coming here. I mean, if they intercept a boat and there's a crate and it says delivered to so-and-so in Florida, but that's unlikely to be the case. So here we see Trump can't listen to good advice. He can't listen to a guy who's sincerely on his side, who tried to defend him during the Russiagate era when the CIA and the FBI and the Democrat Party and the Rhino Republicans were trying to frame Trump and send him to prison. And this was one of the few guys fighting that. And so he won't even listen to him.
Yeah.
So it's not promising that he's going to listen to Putin.
No, exactly. I think that's the problem. Yeah. Thank you so much, Paul. Great pleasure, as always, talking to you.
Well, Nima, I appreciate your questions. You make me think, even late in the afternoon. You know, it's actually past cocktail hour. Okay, Nima. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
See
for
you.
your attention, and I hope the audience appreciates the efforts you go to, because any kind of clear understanding, it's just almost impossible to come across it. Anyhow, you're doing your
Thank you, Paul.
best. Thank
See
you.
you. See you. Bye-bye.